Minister, Group of Seven, the G7 meeting coming up very soon. I know you're excited about it. What do you think you can accomplish?
I think we can move forward on the financial reforms that we need to implement. Lots of discussion here about those, and a lot of those issues arose out of the G7 economies, so it's up to us to have some constructive implementation steps.
Are you surprised to see the battle lines being drawn so aggressively when it comes to financial reforms here in Davos?
Different countries have taken different steps. I think it's time that we had a serious conversation about that and try to coordinate more. That is the idea of the Financial Stability Board, of the G20, of the G7. So we'll have a chance to have a casual conversation next week.
Are you disappointed personally to see individual countries taking those different steps in the wake of the commitments agreed to at the G20?
Well, to the extent that they're not consistent, that's a challenge for us. But I understand. I mean, I am elected. I understand the political pressures that some are facing and the need that some clearly feel to act quickly. But we have to be careful coming out of a recession like this and out of a crisis that we don't take steps that later will prove to be ineffective or negative. So I think the key thing is capitalization of the banks, fix the banks, let's get that done right, and that's something that we all have a mutual interest in.
How do you feel about the populist tone we've heard as of late? Is there a danger in treading that path too aggressively?
Yes, because it can lead to protectionism too. That's in trade, because that's the same kind of populist sentiment. It's easy to convince somebody only buy products produced in your own country. Very short-sighted, very ineffective, bad for the countries that do it, bad for the standard of living in those countries of people. But that's the kind of populist sentiment that we've all agreed in the G20 to resist. So we want to make sure.
Happening.
I know, we want to make sure actions comply with the commitments that people make. So we'll persist.
Do you feel, though, that the message that you'll send at the G7 is going to be strong enough to rein in those populist tendencies, particularly in the United States?
Well, we need to have that discussion together, and we need to coordinate together. There are certain steps that clearly need to be taken that we've talked about internationally, need to be taken to make sure financial institutions are sound and people can rely on those financial institutions. And we have to have some sort of mutual assessment process. That's the fundamentals, and I hope we'll concentrate on the fundamentals.
Do you have a message to the banking industry?
Well, they have some work to do, obviously, in terms of repairing their reputation. But I think they recognize that, and they want to repair that reputation. And the way to do that is to work with the governments involved. I mean, there are things with respect to executive compensation, for example, that the banks together could self-regulate, that they should be talking to each other about, because otherwise they end up with governments intervening.
How much do you think you can accomplish at the G7 meeting on currencies?
I think what we can do is put additional pressure on some of the countries, particularly Asian countries, that are not permitting their currencies to be flexible, on the basis that international trade has privileges and it has responsibilities, and that's one of the responsibilities.
Is the pressure right now, do you feel it here in Davos, increasing on China to make its currency more flexible to achieve what you're talking about?
Yes, I think there's an increasing consensus that is necessary, and China's increasingly a large trading country in the world, and when you're part of the entire international trading scene, the fact that your currency is not a market currency makes a difference.
Do you feel, I'm certain that you've at least had brief exchanges with the Chinese while you've been here, do you feel as though they're increasingly responsive to that groundswell?
I think fundamentally China was going in that direction before the crisis. They say this. We allowed more flexibility in our currency before the crisis. I think as we come out of crisis, I would hope they go back to that track.
At what point is it too late? By what point do you feel you need to see some more flexibility?
This is an ongoing process with the banking issues, with the other systemic issues relating to financial institutions. And with respect to the currency, the Doha round and trade, these are all related issues. Sometimes it takes longer than any of us would like, but directionally that's the important thing, that we're going in the right direction on these issues.
On the subject of China, have you been paying much attention to the dispute between Google and China and the ramifications it has for companies globally, including Canadian companies?
I've been involved in some issues over the years, dealing with information
censorship
in China. Yes, it's a persisting issue.
And what's your personal view? What's the view of the Canadian government?
Well, we have made representations to the Chinese government previously relating to other situations in which we've encouraged them to be less restrictive.
I'm afraid that's where I've got to end it, Minister.
Good.
It's been a pleasure talking to you once
Good to see
again.
you.
Always appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, good to see you.
Great. I think Simon